He's preparing the local GOP for potentially tumultuous midterm elections, and he's confident that they'll maintain control. Welcome to Florida Today's Eye on Brevard. I'm Rob Landers. This week, my counterpart, Isadora got to chat with Rick Lacey, the chairman of the Brevard County Republican Executive Committee, to find out his thoughts on the midterm election possibilities and the problems his party faces after electing, in his words, an unpolished politician to the White House. Watch.
Rick, thank you for being on the show.
No, thank you very much for inviting me.
So 2018 midterm elections, let's talk about that. What is the landscape looking like for Republicans this year?
Well, midterm elections are always a challenge for the party that's in the White House. Historically, we always lose a lot of seats. I believe that when President Obama's first midterm, he lost 64 congressional seats. We need to hold on to at least 24. If we lose 24, we're in trouble. But I think that we're going to do very well. I think that the tax cut that just got through last month is going to put a lot more money in people's paychecks. I think workers across the country are going to see increased economic benefits. And so I think when it comes down to the economy, the stock market's doing great. I just read that home sales in just the month of February are up 3%. So if this continues to go and people feel they can get jobs and they can get their kids in college and buy cars and homes, I think the Republicans are going to do very well.
But then a lot of times the popularity of the president always is a huge factor in midterm elections. And you have one of the most unpopular presidents in the White House right now, despite all these economic factors that show a great optimism. Do you still think that, it's a good scenario for Republicans?
Well, again, it's a challenge. Popular presidents are always much more popular in the votes than unpopular. But I believe that you always see ups and downs in the popularity of a president. I think some of the challenges that we faced this year with trying to get the health care reform addressed probably creates a little bit of a problem. But I think the Republicans have coalesced behind President Trump a lot more in the past few months. In the beginning, it was a little bit of a get to know each other. He had never been elected before. This is all new for him, having run a business and working with a Congress. You don't just give orders and it gets done. He has to work with the legislative leaders. So I think this year will be much more productive, and I think the numbers will rise up, and I think this November will be in good shape.
All this turmoil in the White House, so many staffers leaving, and it seems like, and then Rex Tillerson getting fired over Twitter. How does that make the party look, nationwide? And you think that that's on the minds of voters or just people who are actively following?
I believe it'll be a minor factor, but I think the more important result will be what gets done. I think if we can come to terms with North Korea and get them to stop threatening the rest of the world with nuclear attacks and stop shooting off missiles, I think that would be a big plus. I think the battle against ISIS has gone very well. I wish more people would realize that we basically have wiped out ISIS and we've got control of the Syria-Iraq border once again. Things have gone very well over there in the Middle East. I think that his bold step to place the our embassy in Jerusalem is going to be very well received in the long run. And I think in the long run, the planet will have a lot more peace initiatives introduced over the next years, and I think that will all help the White House. And sure, it's important that you have the right person as Secretary of State, but it's more important for the end results.
And so what are the races that you're focusing on in 2018? We have so many races in Brevard, but some are more competitive than others. What are the ones that you are keeping a watch on?
Well, I'm always interested in the school board races, and that has always been a very important contest for me. Sometimes people feel that those races are totally nonpartisan, but people are still Democrats or Republicans, and we will be looking for the candidates that are going to do the best for our students in this school district. So I always pay a lot of attention to that. Last election, we had Matt Susan and Tina Deskovich elected to the school board, two great school board members. They've made a big impact on the school board, I think very positive. So we're going to be looking for more good candidates for the school board. In addition, we have an open state representative seat. Tom Goodson, who's been a great legislator, cannot run again because of term limits, and we have a number of great candidates running.
Competitive primary. primary.
Exactly, but that is a good thing. It gets more people out there working. It gets more people drawn to the attention to the Republican Party. Tom O'Neill, Jeff Ramsey, Henry Parrish are all great Republicans running for that seat. I think any of them would be a great state representative. We'll
And
see
that's
which
the seat
one
that
wins.
covers Merritt Island and I believe parts of
Cocoa,
Yeah.
correct, yes. And so that'll be a very competitive race, but I think my hope is that all the candidates stay positive, talk about what they're going to do for the district, how they're going to vote in the legislature, not attack each other. And if that works out well, we're going to have a great legislator replacing Tom Goodson.
Let's go back to the school board. Does the party endorse someone, given that this is a nonpartisan election, or?
We can endorse. The state party of Florida allows us to endorse, but they do discourage endorsing in the primaries. They really like to have candidates have a level playing field. And obviously, if we see one candidate that's far superior than the others, we certainly will consider endorsing. But we've always stayed away from endorsing in the primary. We always like to give all the candidates a chance to put their ideas out, introduce themselves to the voters. All of our forums are a chance for all of them to express their views, and then each individual Republican committee person can support the person they want as a Republican. And so we feel that's kind of a pretty good system.
And any other races that rise to that level?
Well, there's, I think the second councilmatic district and the fourth councilmatic district are both going to be competitive commissioner races. We're going to take a look. A number of candidates have withdrawn from the second district.
So, and just to recap, we have Jim Barfield's District 2 seat that is open because he's not running for re-election, and then Kurt Smith is facing a primary challenger, former Commissioner Trudy Infantini. Let's talk about Kurt Smith versus Trudy Infantini. I mean, they're both from the same party, and it's not often that you see an incumbent being challenged in the primary. What are your thoughts about that? And Brevard being so Republican, I think the only division we're sort of seeing is the more far right and the more moderate centrist candidates. And can you talk about that? And is that good for the party?
Again, I think we are the party of the big tent. We truly do allow people with different opinions to express them and support candidates of their choosing. I think Kurt Smith has done a lot of good things on the county commission. There's a few things probably Republicans would disagree with.
Such
but
as?
the same, well, I think there should be some Republicans feel there should be a stronger emphasis on fiscal conservatism and not spending. There's a strong group of Republicans in the county and across the state and the country that feel government spends too much money and that we should be a little more careful of spending other people's money. So I think that there will be some people that will like Trudy Infantini more in that area. But I think both of them are great candidates. I think Trudy has served on the county commission previously. She has her views on certain spending and projects, and Kurt has his. They're going to differ, but I think those differences are good. I think it's great to discuss the issues and then let the Republican voters decide which one they feel is going to best represent them over the next 4 years.
And certainly this election could affect the balance of the county commission, because right now what you have is you have John Tabaya, which usually votes largely against the rest of the commissioners. And then you have Christina Snarty, which is kind of, she can go both ways. If you elect Trudy Infantini, then she's going to mostly side with John Tabaya. That's the expectation. And a lot of things could change with the commission. And the one thing I can think of is the Economic Development Commission. John Tabaya believes that that's a waste of taxpayer monies. For those who don't know, basically what the EDC does is try to attract companies and businesses here. That fight over the EDC, what are your thoughts? Being a Republican, obviously you value being a fiscal conservative, but is there a value for that, investing taxpayer monies to increase our industry?
I do see John Tabaya's point very strongly, and in many ways I side with his viewpoint that we have to. I know that in every state and every county in this country, everybody's competing to get businesses to relocate there. And so it's almost like the way the football teams say, either you build me a new stadium or I'm going to move to another city. And I think at some point we have to kind of stop that. That kind of competition among states doesn't help us. If we're competing to get companies from out of the country here, that's one thing. But companies moving within the state or within the county. I don't think that's always the best use of taxpayer money. However, the results for our economy have been very positive, with Northrop Grumman and a few other companies relocating here, bringing jobs and benefits to our local economy, and that has helped make. I think Florida's rating in U.S. News and World Report was the third best state in the country for fiscal stability. So that has all gone a long way in that. But I do try to feel that we have to start scrutinizing spending by all the county departments and all the agencies that are connected to the county, and that includes the EDC.
Well, how tough do you think it would be for Kurt Smith to win re-election? How do you read this race?
I think both of them are going to be strong candidates. I think Kurt obviously has the advantage because he's the incumbent.
Yes.
He won 4 years ago. I was actually a candidate in that race 4 years ago. There was 7 of us running. So I think he will be the stronger of the two at this point. But, you know, a lot of things can change between now and August. And so, so when we have our picnic in July 8th at the Melbourne Auditorium, we will be having a straw poll there. And I think that will be a very good indication of which candidate is going to be very strong a month later in the primary.
Wow. I look forward to seeing that race. That's going to be a hot one.
It will.
And let's move on. Somebody else who has a primary challenger is State Representative Thad Altman, who has been in the legislature for many, many years as sort of an institution here in Brevard, and he's facing a Tea Party candidate, Matt Nye. Your thoughts on that race, and do you think there is a push to sort of kick more moderate Republicans out of the party?
I don't think so. I think that the challenge that Altman will face is that a lot of Republicans are very big on term limits, and I'm one of them. I believe that the framers of the Constitution they put a 2-year term limit on Congress for that very reason. They do not like to see career politicians. I certainly don't. And I think that while career politicians have a certain institutional memory and experience they bring to the table, I also believe that most Republicans are very strong on term limits. And no matter how good or bad of an elected official you are, after a certain period of time, it's time for somebody else to take over. And so I think that is going to be a big issue. Even if it's Mother Teresa doing a fantastic job, after 8 years or whatever, I think it's time for a fresh face.
And is the issue, Thad Altman was a state senator, and when he reached his term limit, he ran for the House, because they're still allowed to do that. I believe that's the issue you're referring to.
Yes.
So let's move on to Congress. We're seeing this so-called Democratic blue wave, and we've seen some results in Pennsylvania, Texas. There was a huge Democratic turnout, which is unusual for that state, and to a certain extent, Alabama, although there were other factors included there. What do you foresee happening in Florida, and particularly in Brevard, where we have a very safe Republican seat that's Bill Posey?
Well, I don't think any seat is totally safe because I think when the voters look at the candidate and they look at the elected officials, they make a decision. Do they feel that this person is doing the best job of representing them? Are they voting the way they would vote if they were there? Because that's truly what representative government is about. But I think Bill Posey has been a tremendous congressman, not only for our district, but for the country. His leadership on a lot of issues, his leadership on supporting the Space Coast and the space program, his support of tax cuts and his supports of deregulating obstacle for business growth have just been outstanding. So I think no matter who runs against Bill Posey, they're going to have a tough race, because I think the people of this district, everywhere I go, feel that Bill has just done a great job. But it is an election, and we're going to work very hard to re-elect Bill Posey.
Are you changing the way you campaign this season because of what we're seeing happening nationally, or that doesn't make a difference?
Absolutely. We are instituting a number of projects in the Republican Party that we've already started last year. One of them is going to be very significant emphasis on voter registration, making sure that we identify voters that tend not to come out in primaries and get them out there so that they know who the candidates are, support our candidates, and then are set up to vote in November. We are going to be much more visible at some of the fairs and some of the public events in the future. although we've done that in the past. We were always active at Runaway Country. We always participated at booths at the Melbourne Mall, the gun shows. We've always been trying to maintain a very visible presence in the community. But this year I think it's going to be more important because of the fact that it is a midterm election, and historically the party always loses seats.
Yeah.
So the challenge is going to be even more important for us to step up and do that. In fact, that's one of the reasons why at our last Republican meeting, I emphasized the fact that we really need to get more volunteers out there knocking on doors, making phone calls, contacting their neighbors, and making sure anyone that moves into their precinct that's new, get them to register to vote.
And now we have the added factor that you have a much more organized Democratic Party in Brevard, which is it's big news for Brevard. Obviously we're not saying that Democrats are gonna, take over the county anytime soon, but this is new. You have Democrats who are very energized by President Trump's election. What do you see happening? Does that make you a little nervous?
Well, it does make me a little nervous because I've met a lot of the Democrats. I worked the polls last November, and so they are very energized. They have a lot of money, much more money than I've ever seen in the past, so they are going to be much better funded. I think the other concern I see in the state of Florida as a whole is a lot of money is coming in from folks like George Soros, and that's going to be a challenge for us because money helps get mailings out, money helps get headquarters going and phone banks. It helps with TV commercials. So I've been emphasizing in our own party that we have to increase our fundraising activities. Historically, we always had our Lincoln Reagan dinner, and that was pretty much the only fundraiser we had. I've been trying to switch gears, that fundraising has to be a year-round project because we need to fund the projects that we need to elect our Republican candidates. And Brevard County has a special I think, status in the Florida state elections. We were the second best county in November 2016 election. Only Lee County beat us out. We delivered a 62,000 vote margin for President Trump. So the bar has been raised in this county, and we're going to have to really stress the importance of getting a great turnout this November if we hope to elect a Republican governor and elect Rick Scott as the next U.S. Senator.
Your former vice chair stepped down recently. She moved to a different precinct, so she wasn't eligible to be vice chair. But as she stepped down, she made some pretty strong remarks about the party and accused party leadership of belonging to the so-called old guard and trying to prevent new members from coming into the party. And then you have Democrats who seem to be, pretty united and pretty, organized. Is that an issue that you have this perception that the Republicans might not be as united?
Well, I think because we are the kind of the party in power, you always, same with the House of Representatives in Washington, when the Republicans took control, there was always divisions within the party, and I think there always will be. As far as our own party, though, I disagree with this concept that there's an old guard or a new guard. In the past year, since I've been chairman, we brought in 89 new members into the Brevard Republican Party. We basically almost doubled the size of our organization. We brought in a lot of new faces, people like Trish Fowler, Mark Hutchins, Joe Coluccio. A lot of great new talent has been brought in, young faces. We started high school Republican clubs. So I disagree with this notion that there's an old guard versus new guard. My position is every member of BREC, the Republican Party, is equal member, and we all have ideas, we all have talents that we can bring to the table, and so I don't want to see that continue. I want to try to say, look, we're all on the same team, and our job is to be united, to go out there and re-elect Bill Posey, our Republican candidates locally, elect Rick Scott senator, and elect a Republican governor.
Since 2016, so much has happened. We've had women's marches. We have now the #MeToo movement. We've seen the president make disparaging remarks about other countries, about women, about immigrants. And so how does that play into how is the party today when you have someone leading the country that has proven to be so divisive and could really motivate the other side to come out and turn out at the next election?
Well, I think that's important. I think the one area that the Republican Party nationally, statewide, and locally needs to emphasize and do a better job of is in getting the facts out and getting our message out better. The Republican Party has historically been the party that supported women's rights. Jeanette Rankin from Montana, first Republican Congresswoman in the country. Gladys Pyle from South Dakota, first woman senator that was ever elected without taking over from her husband's position in the U.S. Senate, both Republicans. It was Republicans' votes that passed the amendment to give women the right to vote. Ronald Reagan appointed the first woman Supreme Court justice. We had the first, under George Bush, first female African-American Secretary of State. Folks like Nikki Haley and Mary Bolin in Oklahoma have shown that, Marsha Blackburn in Tennessee have shown that Republican women have done outstanding jobs and brought great accomplishments to our country. We have to get that message out. I get a kick, same within this area of civil rights. I get a kick out of some of my Democrat friends who want to remove Andrew Jackson from the $20 bill in place of Harriet Tubman. Recently, I was asked, what did I think of that? I said, well, anytime you want to remove a Democrat and put a Republican, because Harriet Tubman was a registered Republican, I'm for it. So I think our marketing message has to be better. We have to let people know that we are truly the colorblind party, that we are truly the party that is gender blind. We support the best candidates that we find that share our conservative values, that want to get the economy going, protect the environment, support education initiatives, strengthen our defense and our military. And if you are supporting those views in our party platform, we're 100% behind you.
How do you do that while supporting President Trump? Because it seems today that those things are they just don't match together. Being for minorities and supporting the candidate whose opening statement for his campaign was Mexicans are rapists.
Yeah, and I think that the problem I think that President Trump faces, and he did it as a candidate as well, is he is not a career politician. He is somebody who has really been somebody who's hung around a lot of workers and on building sites. He's hung around with a lot of community groups and business development groups, and they don't always have the polished, slick answers. He doesn't always have a bunch of political people telling around him saying, this is what you say when you get that question. I think years on the Howard Stern show picked up some bad habits.
How long will that excuse be valid? He's been a political figure for over 2 years now since he announced he was running. I mean, how long can you use that excuse and not just call him out? This is not the right.
He has been called out, and I think he probably regrets sometimes when he shoots off the cuff and makes comments that are taken wrong. I don't think it's his meaning to make these comments the way they sound, but he's not a polished, slick, market type candidate. This was the first time he ever ran for office, and I think he's going to make mistakes. And I think that he does need to be called out when it's something that's inappropriate. And Republicans have done that. But I think a lot of candidates say comments, they make jokes, they do off-color comments that are just inappropriate. So I think the country as a whole is going from a position where we have to start being a little more sensitive of the fact of what we say, because words do matter.
Would you advise the president to stop tweeting so much?
I probably would.
Why?
I think tweeting is, and I don't tweet, but I think I would like to see comments made from the White House with a lot more depth into them. But you can't do that on a tweet. I think the reason the president does a lot of tweeting is because it's a great way for him to get right to the tens and 20 million people that support him, that like his style, that like his shooting from the hip, that like his ability to fight back and not just always be on the defense. They like what he's doing in the country, and that to a large extent is what a lot of people support the president, even though sometimes they might, ooh, gee, I wish he didn't say that. However, they like the end result of everything that he's accomplished.
Do you see that ever backfiring? People who don't stand up against him today in the future might be on the wrong side of history. Do you see that happening?
Not really. I think that, if you go back through the history of politics, there's been a lot of things that people, including presidents, have done that weren't covered in the media years ago. Things that John Kennedy did, things that Lyndon Johnson did. The media had a policy of not exposing all the warts and wrinkles and faults of the candidates in the past. That has changed today. Now, everything goes, and with 24/7 news cycles, every blemish that a candidate has, every utterance, every move he does or she is on 24/7 television. So I think they have to, all candidates and elected officials have got to learn that they're going to have to change the way they speak and communicate with the country. And that's going to be a challenge, because if you've spent President Trump is 71 years old. He grew up in a generation that was very different, and things weren't always exposed all the time. And so I think he's adjusting to that. And being a non-career politician, he will make mistakes. He has erasers on his pencils. But I think he will learn and develop in the job in that area. But I think that his record is what's going to carry him.
Mm-hmm. So, and how long have you been a Republican for?
For Donald Trump,
just a Republican?
I was, back in when I lived in Pennsylvania, there was a young guy named Mike O'Neill from Philadelphia, and even though Philadelphia was a Democrat city, and he ran for city council. Unfortunately, he didn't win. He was running against a career politician in the Democrat Party. But I worked for him, and that was back in probably the late 70s, early 80s, and got involved in his campaign and became a Philadelphia Republican when I lived in the city for a while, and been active in Republican politics ever since. Became a committee man up there in Pennsylvania, served as an alternate delegate to the National Convention from Pennsylvania, and then when I came down to Florida, I met Barbara Davis and Carly Rogers and Linda Davis and a lot of great Republicans in Brevard County. I got involved, and I was fortunate enough to be elected vice chair and now chair.
And what is the GOP today under President Trump? How has the GOP changed since you started?
I actually don't believe that the GOP has changed. I always tell people President Trump is one Republican holding office for a period of time, but our party's been around since 1854. We were the party of abolition, and we were the party of the environment. We were the party, President Grant created Yellowstone National Park. President Teddy Roosevelt created the Grand Canyon National Park. President Nixon started the Environmental Protection Agency. And that message doesn't get out. I recently saw a poll where only 55% of Americans believed that Lincoln was a Republican. So we're not doing our job marketing our message. Our results and our positions are strong, but we have to do a better job of educating the public as to what the Republican Party has done, has accomplished, and will accomplish in the future if given the opportunity to serve them. And so that marketing job is something where I think we need a big improvement.
We have a few seconds left, but how do you market that, very briefly?
Well, for example, this would have been something that I would have done if I was a Republican national chairman. When the movie Black Panther was out there in the movies last week and the week before, very popular movie, great movie. I think it was a great thing that a comic book character that is African American is up there competing with Batman and Superman and other non-African American superheroes. So I think it was a sense of pride. A lot of African Americans brought their kids to see the movie. Those little commercials at the beginning of the movie, I think that would have been a great time to market to the African American community and tell them, we are here to support you. And here's things that we've done. And we are the party of civil rights. And we are the party of abolition of slavery. And we are the party that is the party of opportunity to increase the economic benefits to all Americans, including African Americans. I think that was a missed opportunity. That would be something that I would have done.
All right, Rick, thank you so much. We're out of time, but this was great conversation.
Great, thank you so much, Isadora.
Well, that's our show. My thanks to Rick Lacey for joining us here in the studio. If you have any questions regarding today's interview, please contact Isadora at irangel@floridatoday.com. Be sure to join us again next week right here on WEFS and on floridatoday.com.